Let's do it.
This is the SEC Insider Hit. And it's presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue.
Good morning. Welcome in. Hail to the victor. Go blue. Michigan Wolverines, Jim Harbaugh with the national championship, and Michigan ends up dominating the Washington Huskies, and they win it all. Jimmy Harbaugh with the national championship, and his brother, John Harbaugh, was there, Super Bowl champion with the Baltimore Ravens. We want to welcome in Steve Deace to the Out of Bounds Show at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. He joins us on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Your SEC Insider Hit this morning is presented by Blue Cross Blue Shield of Mississippi. It's good to be blue, the official healthcare provider of the Out of Bounds Show. Steve Deace, how does it feel to be a national champion?
I got to tell you, Bo, it's still kind of surreal. You know, if I was a Gen X or Gen Y, I am Gen X. If I was a Gen Z or millennial, I might feel differently. I might feel the euphoria I felt after winning the Rose Bowl last week, but I'm not. I'm Gen X, you know, and so I'm still kind of getting used to there was another game after the Rose Bowl, you know, and so after the Rose Bowl, it felt like we did it all and we beat mighty Alabama. And then, you know, you woke up, you had to get back to work, and then, you know, you woke up a couple of days, you're like, crap, man, we got another game Monday. You know, you're winning the national championship, you know, and so it's probably going to take a while. I'm going to guess, you know, a couple of weeks of being subjected to whatever the hell Juwan Howard calls a basketball program will probably help remind me of this euphoria. But right now, it's still kind of surreal.
All right, what a performance by the defense. Okay, yeah, Can
I put a couple of numbers to that, by the way, real quick, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
So they almost eclipsed Georgia for the best scoring defense of a national champion so far this century. It's the best scoring defense in Big Ten history. You know, we're a league that plays a little defense or doesn't play much offense, depending on your perspective. But it's the best scoring defense in Big Ten history since Michigan's 1997 national championship. We're the first team since 2001 Miami, considered perhaps the best team so far this century, to lead at every game at the half. We're the first team since then to do that. We only trailed in the fourth quarter or in the second half one time all year, and that was the lead that Alabama took in the fourth quarter of the Rose Bowl. So, I mean, we're talking historical levels of dominance. There were 17 quarterback pressures on Michael Penix last night. He was sacked on 2 of those. On the other 15, he went 2 of 15 for like 17 yards passing or something like that. Okay. So yes, I mean, first Mike McDonald, he set the foundation, and he's probably going to get an NFL coaching job here soon. But his predecessor, Jesse Minter, took it to a completely different level from down there in the SEC. And we barely held on to him last year. And I think he was gone regardless of what Harbaugh did with this performance. The Eagles are probably killing themselves that they didn't hire him when they had the chance, given what's happened to their defense. So I could see him go back to Baltimore to replace Mike McDonald as DC when he gets an HC job. So historically, this is one of the greatest defenses in modern college football history.
Absolutely. To piggyback off what Steve Deace said at Michigan Podcast on Twitter, first team since Minnesota, 1903, to hold all 15 opponents to 25 points or less. Yep. Just remarkable. And Steve, here's what else. Michigan recruits well, but you are not an elite recruiter. Only 2 non-elite recruiters won the national championship in the 2000s. Your Michigan Wolverines and the Clemson Tigers. How about that?
Right. And we have a Deshaun Watson level quarterback, but he's just not there yet. Like, if he comes back next year, that's probably the year that he realizes that. Okay. You could see last night, his footwork and stuff in the pocket is still inconsistent. He still misses. He makes a lot of the wow plays, misses too many of the gimmies. You can still see that last night. So he's a first-round quarterback. He's just not there yet as a player in college, even if he gets drafted in the first round next spring. Deshaun Watson was a fully realized, developed weapon for Clemson.
Yeah.
The two things that those two programs have in common: elite level development. I mean, if you looked at Michigan, Alabama, we talked about this last week in the Rose Bowl. went back and I watched the all 22 of that game, and it just blew my mind watching Michigan just blow Alabama off the ball, particularly in the first half, just over and over and over again. And so you're talking elite levels of player development, but then a very strong culture. Now, maybe it's become a little incestuous for Clemson with Dabo not wanting to accept the reality of the transfer portal. But in his defense, you can see why he wanted to build a moat there as long as possible around the program, because internally what they created, where you think at a lower level, we have a lot of what we call developmental programs in the Big Ten. Mark D'Antonio, when Michigan State was really humming, Iowa under Kirk Ferentz. Kirk has said for years, we take 1- and 2-star guys, and then when they leave here, they look like 4- and 5-star guys. Okay. But what we did is we took a lot of 3- and 4-star guys. So we're starting with a different level of base than an Iowa or a D'Antonio Michigan State did. We took a lot of 3- and 4-star guys like Clemson did. And then when we walked out of here, they looked like first day or second day NFL draft picks, right? They looked like pros. They were grown men. They looked like professional football players. And you see this last night. I mean, there's one real superstar on that defense in Will Johnson, but he's just a sophomore. He'll have to come back next year. A lot of those other guys, Mike Barrett was a decorated high school quarterback in the state of Georgia, but kind of your classic tweener, didn't have enough of an arm to play quarterback, maybe wasn't fast enough to play receiver. We took him, developed him into a phenomenal linebacker. And we put him next to Junior Colston from Nashville, who was a big-time top 100 recruit and looks like the Incredible Hulk. So those two guys are kind of and according to Pro Football Focus, that was the best linebacker duo in the country this year. So those two guys are kind of the epitome. There's a handful of Alabama-level recruits in the program. Junior Colston's one of them, and the rest of them are guys that are elite-level athletes that get developed over the course of 3 to 4 years and really hone their craft. And so by the time that they are playing now, they are grown men, and they know what they're doing. They're basically professional football players.
Yeah. Steve Deace, Michigan Insider, at Michigan Podcast, on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line, and Michigan knocks down a national championship by going 15-0. And again, all 15 opponents held to 25 points or less. It's just a remarkable feat. Harbaugh's amazing, and I agree with Steve. Elite level of player development. What does this mean to you, knowing that Bo Schembechler never won it, and Harbaugh played for Schembechler and comes back to his alma mater and wins it?
It's I think you could have a conversation now whether Jimmy is the greatest Wolverine ever, and when you consider all that means. We were the first dominant program in the history of the sport. There were Ivy League teams in the late 19th century that were dominant, but the sport was largely regional and elitist. Fielding Yost from West Virginia, he took the sport global, made it a national sport, basically invented the Rose Bowl. We invented the Big Ten Conference, the first formal power conference. We created it as a university. We were the cornerstone of it. We created the modern football helmet with the stripes and everything that you see with Fritz Chrysler. That goes back to Michigan. The history and legacy of Michigan football, to say he might be the greatest Wolverine ever, but stop and think about this. We've only had one quarterback ever picked in the first round of the NFL draft. It's Jim. Until Bo used to tell a story. We went to recruit Rick Meyer, whose parents were both Michigan grads, and he was from Goshen, Indiana, which was has a lot of Michigan fans there. And Rick was enamored with Lou Holtz and Notre Dame, and so he goes in on a Monday night to recruit Rick Meyer, and they turn on the Monday Night Football game, and the Bears with Jim Harbaugh, he's making his first start. And Dan Deerdorf, who's calling the game, a Michigan, All-American on Monday Night Football, and Bo's thinking, I've got this in the bag. This is perfect timing. And Deerdorf starts off the broadcast by saying, no Michigan quarterback has ever thrown a touchdown pass in the NFL. And Bo looks at Meyer and he says, but you could be the first. All right. He realized right then he wasn't getting that kid. Okay. So in the history of Michigan football, he's the first one we've had throw a touchdown pass in the NFL. He was a number 3 for the Heisman Trophy. Bo's highest rated team, he was the quarterback, the number 2 team that finished number 2 in 85. He finished the number 1 rated passer in college football that season. Won a Big Ten. He's in the Ring of Honor for the Indianapolis Colts. And then what he has done here, winning the school's first undisputed, unshared national championship since post-World War II. I mean, he's at least in the conversation. And I think no one, if he were alive today, no one would be prouder of that than Bo.
Wow. All right, Steve Deace on the Out of Bounds Show. Do you have a few more minutes? You got to jump off.
Sure, I've got a few more.
Okay. Will you tell the story? I remember reading it as a kid in Sports Illustrated. Walk me through it. Schembechler moves over to the AD. Is it Gary Moeller? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moeller gets into some kind of altercation at a restaurant in the offseason. This is like early 90s.
Bo left as AD. Now, he's president of the Tigers when this happened.
Okay,
so, yeah.
okay. And he's down at Florida, I think at his vacation home. And he's trying to get in touch with Moeller, who immediately resigns, but there's really no cell phones at this time. Walk me through this story on Moeller with the altercation with an alum or a fan that's piping off, and then how Lloyd Carr got the job.
So what happened is Michigan had gone 8-4 2 years in a row, and '94 was particularly painful. That's as talented of a Michigan football team as I have seen in my lifetime, top to bottom. I mean, on offense and defense. I mean, guys that would, go on and star in the NFL for many, many years. Tyrone Wheatley, Trevor Price. I mean, that team is loaded. And that was the Colorado Hail Mary team. It was just an undisciplined team. They went 8-4 2 years in a row. Fans are getting really upset. Moeller gets into it. You mentioned it, at a suburban Detroit restaurant. Has had way too much to drink. He's way too belligerent. And it took a while for this story to emerge because it's pre-social media. But then once the story emerged, this happened in the middle of May, if I recall. And then once that story emerged, Michigan decided it had to move on and replace him as head coach. And this was a very controversial move at the time because, frankly, if this had occurred in May of after the 1992 team went undefeated and won the Rose Bowl, Moeller would probably not have been removed. So it's one of those things where, he was guilty of acting belligerently and showing his rear end while having 4 lost seasons, as opposed to doing that while being undefeated, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And Lloyd Carr got the job in the middle of spring. He was told immediately, you will never be the head coach here, so don't get used to it. We're going to try to get a big name now, and if we can't, then we'll do that after this season, and you'll just be an interim for 1 year. All the coaches were put on interim contracts, told not to get happy in Ann Arbor. But then after the next season, though, they started 7-1. They were ranked in the top 10, and at that point, the school kind of felt like they had to give it to Lloyd Carr, so they did.
Okay. Did Lloyd Carr, once he stepped down, sabotage the program? When guys like Rich Rod, not that they were still maybe worthy of leading, but I don't know, Rich Rod was pretty hot. But Rich Rod, Brady Hoke, was he still kind of acting like Philip Fulmer in the back and wanting to be the power broker, or no?
I think that's a good analogy. I think sabotage is too strong. I think both when you're an alum like a Phil Fulmer, he's one of the few like Jim to win a national championship at his alma mater. When you're a professor emeritus like Lloyd Carr was, when you have done what those guys have done, you think what you're doing is right. You're shepherding, you're gatekeeping, and let's face it, several of the coaches that were hired after Phil Fulmer weren't any good. Okay, so and then the one they got that was good left for USC like 1 year later, and
right.
Lane Kiffin. So in the case of Rich Rod, was he treated unfairly here? Yes. Did he completely show, though, that he could not rise above and wasn't ready for a job of this magnitude? Without question. Because here's the reality, Bo. Even if he had been welcomed unilaterally, if he goes out there and loses badly to Ohio State his first year as an outsider, the exact same thing would have happened organically anyway, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
Okay? So he just proved incapable of understanding the magnitude of the job. I mean, his last Michigan football banquet before he was fired for the Gator Bowl, he had the team get together and everybody there and try to get them to hold hands and sing some Josh Groban song together out loud. And one of the most cringe-inducing moments that if we had a fully weaponized social media back then like we do now, would have been one of the most viewed and mocked videos in the history of college football Twitter, probably. All right. he just wasn't cut out for this job. It was beyond him. But everybody was very divided after Lloyd stepped down, and there was no clear indication of where to go, because the one candidate that was the best for the job in Les Miles, who wanted it, had way too much baggage for Lloyd and other members of the administration to sign on to.
Okay,
with the kind of baggage you're seeing play out right now, by the way, if you know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Okay.
Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on Twitter, Michigan Insider. He joins us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Now, people are already talking. First of all, even if this does happen, you're still the national champion. But there could be an investigation later. It looks like, as you refer to him, Jimmy Harbaugh will take an NFL job in the next 2 or 3 days. But what a way to go out. Do you think that Ward Manuel and Santa Ono have the guts, stones, and wherewithal to fight just in case they try to in case they try to vacate it, Steve?
Without question. I'm not even worried about that. First of all, they don't control the college football playoffs, so I'm not sure what they would be vacating.
Okay.
Number one, I mean, that we probably need some clarification. And we've only seen vacated wins in one scenario, and that has been if you had played players that were ineligible because of an improper inducement.
That's a good point.
So that's none of the allegations that are going on here. By the way, if you read the article in The Athletic last week where recruits are just openly talking about what they're being paid by NIL, I mean, even if you think Jimmy bought those kids those hamburgers after the Wisconsin COVID game in 2020 and lied bold-faced about it, that is nothing compared to the stuff that is going on right up. I mean, I love the Cover 3 podcast. I listen to it as much as I can. I think it's the best college football podcast out there. All right. I mean, for goodness sakes, Bud Elliott at 24/7 Sports, who's their national recruiting guy, just openly talks about what schools are dropping bags. He's just openly talking about, Quinshawn Junkins there. He probably is worth about $350,000 on the open market, I would guess. Just openly talking about this stuff, man. I mean, come on. What are we even doing here, Bo? What are we even doing here? And I'll tell you what I think we're doing here. What I think we're doing here is go look at Pete Thamel's Twitter thread, and you're going to find he has an unusual, uncanny ability to break Ohio State favorable news. It's really weird, number one. Number two, I think what we're doing here is Jimmy spent much of his press conference at Media Day on Saturday talking about revenue sharing for the players again, talking about coaches deferring 5 to 10% of their own salaries into a salary pool for the players and revenue sharing again. I think that's what this is about. This is more than anything else. Do I think he probably didn't tell the full truth about paying? That he probably said, screw you. Yeah, I bought those hamburgers, but no, I'm not giving it to you guys. When I've watched you guys look the other way on blank, 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 blank lake, do I think that's probably what happened? Yes. Okay. But in the grand scheme of things, I think it's very Trumpian. All right. In that, is there many things about Donald Trump that make you wince and cringe and think to yourself, why are you doing this? What is the point of this? Why play in traffic? There's nothing to be gained. But then do his opponents use that as an excuse to say, this is the Antichrist? And you're like, okay, come on, man. What are we doing here? All right. That's exactly the same dynamic going on here with Harbaugh and the NCAA. He plays in traffic when he shouldn't need to. And then they use that to further their own agenda by an order of magnitude. I think this is really about, he is the most high-profile figure we've had in the sport. Remember, that has come out and argued for these sorts of reforms that would essentially end the NCAA. And keep in mind, by the way, he was also the first high-profile coach to argue for the transfer portal. People forget about that.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast, Michigan Insider. And it's a good day to be a national championship for Hail to the Victor. Congratulations. Thanks for the time today. We appreciate it. We will. Yeah, I hate to say it. We may be bringing you on in the next week or two, and you may either have Sharon Moore or Brian Kelly or DeBoer. Look, I'd go get DeBoer. I wouldn't promote from within, but
it's not going to be Brian Kelly. That's not happening.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Steve Deace. Appreciate it.
You got it. Take care. Bye-bye.
He joined us on the Farm Bureau Insurance guest line. Bundle your car and home and save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Did you ever think that we would do this many Michigan segments?
Never. I mean, this was Michigan's season. Like, not just because they were so good.
Because Jim's so polarizing.
Yes.
Because Harbaugh thumbed his nose at conventional wisdom, which you have to do, really. at the end of the day. And he's brilliant. He's odd. He's on the spectrum a little bit. Let me say again, he's brilliant. I couldn't agree with Dace more. Elite level of player development. 2 programs, Jason, in the 2000s. Clemson and Michigan.
And when you mentioned Clemson in the 2000s, Michigan's in some pretty good company.
Oh, absolutely. And look, on our Ag Up Equipment text line, people were like, did he really compare, J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback, to Deshaun Watson? I don't think. No, he did. He doesn't think that J.J.'s that good yet, and he may never be. But don't forget, McCarthy still has eligibility.
Yeah.
Don't forget that Deshaun lost the year before to Alabama. Played well, but lost the year before, and then the next year they beat Alabama, and we talk about it all the time, how hard it is to beat an elite level of Alabama team because it took 59 minutes and 59 seconds, right, on the 1-yard line and a little rub route to Hunter Renfrow for Clemson to win. Last night, at the end of the day, Michigan imposes their will in the fourth quarter. But they're the most well-coached team in college football this year. I mean, Harbaugh, you can say what you want about him, but it's like fundamentally sound. His coach is understanding what he wants. Again, making players better, taking 3- and 4-star players. Because what are they, 12th, 13th recruiter? Still great, right? You're still landing really good players.
Yeah.
But you're not loaded up like Kirby and Saban. I mean, who are the 4 big boys? Kirby, Saban, LSU, Ohio State, right? So those are the 4 elites. And then there's, Texas is trending that way. A&M, they jumped in the pool, but they had to get out. So
Oregon's been.
Oh, Dan Lanning's a maniac.
Yeah.
I mean, they're throwing SEC money, no doubt, and you have to against because the 2 most, well, I don't want to say most rabid. Bama's the most rabid, but Kirby has turned Georgia into, I always said this on the show long before you even knew we had a show. Georgia was the martini. They were the golf crowd. I mean, I've been over to Athens. They'd sit up in the stands, give you a good golf martini clap. We'll win 8 or 9, 10 games maybe a year. It's all good. Kirby came in, burned that down. He said, that's not what we're doing. We're going to throw down. I saw how we did it at Bama. We're going to load the boat, and we're going to win on as many 5-star battles as Alabama. So the most ruthless, relentless, I guess, alumni networks are Georgia, Bama, and LSU. And I'm not saying Ohio State's, soft by any stretch, but I'm still going Bama, Georgia, LSU, as far as the most ruthless and relentless with duffel bags of cash or whatever you want to say. Truckloads, SUVs full, whatever.
Or SUVs in general.
Yeah,
I mean,
or SUV. Well, no, you get the SUV, but you also get all the cash in there.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
That's a good deal.
Absolutely.
I'll take that.
I'd take the cash. We are the Out of Bounds Show. We're driven by our friends at Mack Hike Ford. Are you in the market for a Ford F-150 truck? Go see our crew. Mack Hike Ford, I-55 North in Jackson. They've got the best selection of Ford F-150s, pre-owned and new. Good morning. Welcome in Mike Detillier, WWL Radio TV New Orleans at 8:30.